Welcome to another episode of the Collective Evolution podcast. Today my guest is Jason Quitt. Jason is the author of a book called Astral Genesis, Astrological Keys to the Gods. And when he initially showed me what he found in this book, and I'm going to try and keep this intro short, it kind of blew my socks off. I'll be honest, at first I was looking at it, trying to wrap my mind around it. Him and I had some conversations, and then once it sunk in to some extent what he was presenting in this research that he has done, my mind was blown. I'll be honest. There's some fascinating stuff here, and we're going to get to it in this conversation. And essentially what it is it's a language that Jason seems to have found within ancient artwork. You know, the Egyptians, going back to Sumerian art. There's art from cultures all around the world dating back thousands and thousands of years. They all seemed to know something, and they all seem to have this code within their artwork. Now, I know I'm kind of being vague, and that's the point, because I really want you to check out this episode in its entirety, because as we build in the conversation, things get more and more interesting. And here, I'll say one thing before we get to the conversation. When we were initially having these discussions, I thought to myself, there has to be visuals to this, because people need to be able to see how this language is actually being portrayed very clearly in the artwork. Because when you're just listening to it, it kind of sounds like, well, you might just be making things fit where you want. But when you actually see it, you're like, okay, this is a totally different story. So I encourage you can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. But by all means, check out the link in the description to our YouTube channel, the Collective Evolution YouTube channel, where you can see this interview in its entirety with the visuals that go with it, because those visuals become very, very important. With that said, let's get on with the show. All right, Jason, it's been a little bit since we had you on the show. It's good to have you back. How's your 2024 been so far?
It's been good. It's been very cold here, snowing, which has kept me indoors, which for me is a really good thing, because I've been right here writing every single day, which is what I do every winter.
Mm-hmm. Writing a book. Well, speaking of books, we're going to talk about your last book, actually, that you released. And I remember I was thinking back to, you sent me a PDF copy of this. I want to say it was like last year, or maybe the tail end of the year before.
It was last year, yeah. It was last year.
And you were essentially like, can you look at this and tell me what you think? Because, it was kind of like pretty baffling information, and kind of would upset quite a few things that have been studied with regards to anything from UFOs, ancient civilizations, to, the way people are interpreting Egyptian motifs, Egyptian artwork. And of course, even other civilizations from around the world. And you were like, is there something here? Am I making something here that's not actually there? I remember you were going through that with this book. And I looked at it and I said, hey, there's something really interesting here. But I'm not going to lie, it's tough to wrap my mind around, because it is quite complex. So starting from that point, I want you to try, because, of course, people are going to be listening to this as a podcast, but some people are going to be like, yeah, let me get over to YouTube. And I'm going to recommend, if you're listening to this, check this out on YouTube, because the video portion of this is going to be really important, because we're going to go through a number of images, number of, little bits of presentation that are going to help put all this into context. But with that as a starting point, Jason, can you kind of lay out, what were you discovering / exploring in this new book in a way that sets it off so that people can kind of wrap their mind around what we're about to go through?
Okay. Well, people that are familiar with my work and have followed me over the years, they know that one of my main books that I've written is called The Egyptian Postures of Power. And during the beginning of COVID, I decided that I would rewrite this book from scratch and put all new information in it, and really go deep into this kind of philosophy of postures, of qigong, of ancient statues, ancient artwork that depict different postures. And basically the mysticism that goes behind this, the ancient myths, the ancient motifs, And so I was writing that book, and it was part one. So after I released this book, there's a part two to it. So I started to write the part two, which is all about the moon. And I wanted to really focus on the mysticism of the moon, the mysticism of the afterlife, going back to Egypt. So I spent a lot of my time in the research phase just going into the ancient texts. So no interpretations, just straight into reading the pyramid texts, reading the Egyptian Book of the Dead, just reading any type of ancient translations that I could find from ancient Egypt. And what I was finding fascinating was that there was this motif that was overlaid on top of this journey of the afterlife. And I found that it was a match of the sun going through its cycle of life and death. And Egypt, it's all about sun worship. It's all about resurrection, the death of the sun. It's all about going into the underworld. And I found that the stories that were put in there, or the journey of the soul through the underworld to be resurrected or reborn as Horus on the other side, is the same story as the sun moving through the yearly cycle of the year. So it was a motif, and there would be different stories or different gods that would represent different stars. So different constellations of the heaven, different places in the sky. And as you would move through the gates, or as you would move through the underworld, you would be basically passing through the night sky. Mm-hmm. So I found this very fascinating, and I started to realize that there was this underlying story that has to do with the cycles of creation. And it was written in a way that it was about the gods, but let's say if you understood how the cycles of time work, then you realize that this is more than just a story. There's tons of information packed in here, and that you really have to know what you're looking at or looking for to grasp the entire story. So instead of seeing hieroglyphs of gods doing whatever tasks they're doing, I started to see them as constellations or stars. And as the sun is passing through their time of the year, you get different stories, because it's like as above, so below. When the sun is in a certain part of the sky during the year, there's different things happening on the planet at that time. So this is where I start. And I'm really getting into this. And then I start going into the Valley of the Kings, Valley of the Queens, looking at the ancient tombs, because in the tombs there's unbelievable artwork. It's so beautiful. And every wall, every pillar, all the ceilings are just covered in artwork. So I'm going through these virtual tours and looking at all the different motifs on the walls. And I came across a very strange depiction. And the depiction was of Horus and Set in one body. And if you know from the stories of ancient Egypt, Horus and Set are basically complete opposites. Set is fighting Horus to be the ruler of the heavens, and Horus ends up winning. Yeah. And again, that's a solar motif. Mm-hmm. It's the fighting from light and dark. And so now we have a figure of Horus and Set in the same body. So it's one body with two heads looking in opposite directions. And it's standing on a double-headed sphinx. Mm-hmm. I was like, what is this, right? And I thought this was a really nice image. And what I do in my books is I'll take the hieroglyph, for example. And because I don't use any pictures, I take it on Illustrator and I trace it perfectly. Yeah. So it's like an identical trace of what this hieroglyph looks like. So I have a vector file of it. Mm-hmm. And I started to trace a couple other hieroglyphs, and I realized that they were similar. So even though they were not the same hieroglyph, they followed the same template. And when I drew a line I just followed the template, I realized that there was very specific angles to this template. And this angle was 23.5 degrees. And at the time, I didn't really understand what I was looking at. And, then I realized this is something that they teach us in grade school. Okay. This is 101 geography, earth sciences, and it has to do with the seasons.
Yeah.
As in, the earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees, and this is what gives us the 4 seasons. Gives us the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes. And it just hit me that, okay, this is very important information, because if they're setting up their hieroglyphs or their images using a pattern of 23.5 degrees, plus it's a solar motif itself, being Horus and Set, it's a solar motif, then let me see if this angle is in other solar motifs in Egypt. And then when I started...
Can I just pause you for 1 second?
Of course,
okay,
of course.
So here's what I want to do. As I'm kind of recapping, if you can pull up the, the image of that solar motif from your book with kind of the template on top, if you will, just so that people can kind of wrap their minds around what we're talking about. Because what you're sort of saying so far is, here you're going across, you found... Some people might talk about it as artwork. Some people may define it as, motifs, right? Essentially, it's these depictions, these images that are found, whether it's carved into stone or painted into various areas, whether it's an actual figurine. There are these pieces of artwork, if you will, that you're looking at, and you're finding that these pieces of artwork that have to do with something having to do with the sun, when they're about the sun or related to the sun, you've found something profound here that provides an explanation for what these things could mean. So if you could pull that up and kind of show people what it is you're talking about, I think this could be pretty cool.
Sure. Okay, so this is the artwork that I traced from the Valley of the Kings, the wall of the room of Pharaoh. It's actually, this is actually a queen, actually. Tusert is a queen. So this is almost 4,000 years old. Oh, sorry, 3,100 years old, basically. And what you see here is you have the Horus and Set in one body standing on the double-headed Sphinx, which is actually, these are the children of Horus, by the way. So Horus has 4 children, which are the cardinal directions, the cardinal pillars of creation, is the 4 sons of Horus. And, he's standing in a very interesting pose. His arms are completely equal, out to the side, palms facing down over the crowns of the Sphinx. And when you draw a line from the bottom of this scene through the body, it goes through the hands and the crown at 23.5 degrees. Mm-hmm. So this was the first thing I found. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. But if you go here, for example, here's an article. The equinox reveals one of the secrets of Egypt's iconic Sphinx. And basically what it's saying is that during the equinox, the sun sets on the back of the Sphinx. All right, so this is very important. The sun stands basically on the back of the Sphinx during the equinox. Well, look, the sun god, is standing on the back of the Sphinx, completely equal during the equinox. All right, at 23.5 degrees.
Yeah.
Now, if you go to the actual layout of the pyramid structure itself, and this is well known already, if you take this 23.5 degree angle and put it right at the Sphinx, and you draw these lines at that 23.5 degree angle, it turns the entire layout of the plateau in Giza as a solar cycle clock.
Yeah.
As in, if you stand in front of the Sphinx and you watch the sun setting during the year, right at the winter solstice, that sun is going to set behind Menkaure. Right out the corner of Menkaure, you'll see the sun setting. During the equinox, it will set right on the back of the Sphinx. And then during the summer solstice, it will set right in between Khafre and Khufu, between the two mountains, the two hills, which is another motif of a solar motif called the Akhet. All right, so these are ancient motifs of the sun, and the layout of the pyramids are all set up to this 23.5 degrees. So another thing, which I don't have a slide for, but I'll just say, is that the Great Pyramid, Khufu, it's not a 4-sided pyramid, it's an 8-sided pyramid. And during the equinox, a slight shadow goes on one side and the other side is lit up. So think about that. Half of the face of the pyramid is light and half of the face of the pyramid is dark.
Right.
And this is exactly the motif that we're seeing here with Horus and Set being completely equal at the equinox. So this is where I started my journey.
Yeah.
And, I found that interesting, but it wasn't like, I had to find more examples.
Yeah.
Right. And this is where the journey started. And then I started to kind of see it all over Egypt, spanning thousands of years, unbroken, the same type of motif. And then I thought to myself, okay, well, let's expand this search. And then I started to expand the search, and I went into Mesopotamia, Samaria, Akkadian, Babylon, and I found it there. Exactly the same thing. I found it there perfectly. And I said, okay, this is, there's something to this.
Yeah.
And then what really made me insane, and this is when I was trying to explain it to you, and I gave you a little presentation about a year ago, is that these symbols and this type of design motif is found in South America, Central America, and North America too.
Yeah.
It's also found in China. It's also found in Japan. So I started to see this very ancient motif, this solar motif, going all the way back to Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
So since the last ice age.
Yeah. So let's for people who are listening to this and they're going, okay, you saw this one image in a tomb, and now you're saying you've gone through and you've looked at different solar motifs around the world and you're seeing the same pattern, but so it's about the sun. So what? Can you describe the significance of why the sun would be important here in this picture, so that people can, because if you're listening to this and you're kind of like a little confused or you're having a hard time sort of wrapping your mind around some of this, the significance builds. That's all I'll say. And it took me a little bit of time to sort of wrap my mind around it too. But the significance builds because what we're seeing is, dare I use the word code, which you use. There's a code hidden in all of this stuff that we're exploring here that is incredible. Once you sort of see it, you're like, oh my gosh. And it's something that is profound in the sense of, like, it's not easy to just say, well, you could have made that up. You could have just done anything, because it becomes so obvious. So what would be the significance of the sun to these people at this time?
Okay. You got to put your mind back to the people that are coming out of the last ice age. Mm-hmm. All right. So you have the Younger Dryas event, climate event. The climate becomes warmer. The ice starts to melt. And you have a more stable environment. Because of all the melting, because the change of temperature, you suddenly get fertile lands. You have places to farm. So if you go back 10,000 years, you start to see the early Neolithic people, and they gather in groups of communities, and they farm. They herd animals, they farm. So they're no longer hunting and gathering. They're finding a stable position on fertile land. They're farming, they're irrigating the land. This is pre-pottery, by the way. Okay, so this is pre-pottery. You have people irrigating the land, bringing in water, planting food, and herding animals. And they start to learn from their environment. So they're studying the patterns of the stars, they're studying the moon, they're studying the sun. What they find is that the only thing that's connected to life on Earth is the sun. And the reason I'm saying this is because if you're living at this age of time, you have to know when to plant your seeds, when to harvest, when to store your food, when the inundation or rainy season is going to come, because those cycles are vital to survival. So this is where you start to get the early like festivals where they celebrate the gods of the rain, the rain gods or the water gods, and the oldest one is Enki, the Sumerian god of the water. And when you go to Egypt, it's Osiris, So, and they're both basically gods of the water and vegetation. So the water comes in and, the vegetation grows, and this is the resurrection of life. Mm-hmm. So they study the patterns. Now, the best clock in the world is the moon, because the moon, you can actually see a face, and it changes its face every 30 days between full and new moon. And so basically, that there's a timepiece is the moon, but the moon is not synced to the cycles of the seasons. All right? The only thing that's synced to the cycles of the seasons is the sun, and the reason it's synced is because the Earth is tilted to 23.5 degrees.
Yeah.
So as the Earth moves around the sun, depending on what stars you see in the sky during that time of year and the position of the sun at the rising and setting position of the year, there's a specific thing happening on the Earth at that time. So for example, one of the most famous stars one of the most famous constellations in the sky is Orion. They call it the Great Hunter. And then it's in the Taurus constellation, and he's hunting the bull. Basically, this is a very old, ancient motif. You have the Pleiades above the horns of the bull. And when you see Orion in the night sky in the northern hemisphere, that is the winter constellations. Mm-hmm. So when you start to see Orion in the sky, it's okay, this is winter. So they knew that when the sun is in its lowest position in the sky, or the lowest southerly rising or setting position on the horizon, and that Orion is in the sky, they know it's winter. So they could map all of these things. Now, if you look out, the sun rises in the eastern horizon throughout the year, and it goes from the most southern position, which we will call winter, and it goes all the way to the northern position, which we'll call summer. And when it gets to their most, when it comes to its most extreme positions on the horizon, the sun basically stops. It doesn't move for about 3 days. Mm-hmm. And this is where we get the stories of, after being dead for 3 days, the sun is resurrected. Or after, Lazarus was dead for 3 days, he was then resurrected. These motifs go back way before the Bible.
Yeah.
So it's a solstice. The sun stands still for 3 days, 72 hours.
Yeah.
And then it comes directly in the center, which is the equinox. So these ancient people mapped the rising and setting positions of the sun on the horizon throughout the entire year. And they realized that when the sun was in very specific positions, the weather changed. The animals moved, the plants grew, or the plants died.
Yeah.
So for ancient people, this was the most important survival information there is.
Yeah.
And
In a sense, it's why we're still here.
that's right. And my whole philosophy now, or my whole vision right now, is that we became a civilization once we learned how to measure the stars and the sun.
Yeah.
So once we mapped heaven and understood the cycles, that is when we could stop becoming hunter and gathering society,
Yeah.
and start building actual civilization. So this is why this information, it's so basic.
Yeah.
So basic, but it's foundational knowledge of our civilization.
Yeah. So if we're thinking back to the significance of this for ancient peoples that were discovering this, it's like to them, this is how we maintain life. This is how we survive. This is how we find ways to, like you said, plant foods, stay warm, know where to live, know how to live in particular ways in the sense of how we set up maybe our domiciles, or how we set up the way we farm and do all these things. Like, this is literally one of the most important things that any of these people would find sacred, in a sense, right? And this is why there is that sun worship in the past. So what you're finding in your work, and again, I'm recapping here, is you found that this sacredness, this key to life, in essence, that they determined, which is, the path and the patterns of the sun, was a key to life for them. They encoded into their artwork. They encoded into their motifs, into the things that we find specifically when it's about the sun. So it's not every piece of artwork from the past. It's specifically artwork about the sun. And so am I correct in sort of recapping what you're saying there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, when you go back in time, you'll see these things called like ancient Stonehenges, where they're just standing stones in circles. And these were ways of marking the sky, marking the positions of rising stars, marking the positions of rising or falling the sun. And it's from these markers that over long observation, they can actually start to create a calendar. They could start creating a long count calendar of different cycles. They could even map the planets. And this is what they're actually finding with the Mayan calendar, is that all these different types of counting systems that were used in that culture were tuned to different planets and their orbits.
Yeah.
So this could be very, very advanced, and this is what we had thousands of years ago. Now, we come to this in this kind of modern age as we kind of know it all and we're smarter than everybody. And, we have satellites and we can calculate everything. And, when you go back into the history books, I believe they say that it was discovered. Actually, I got the slide here. Let me see if I can pull this up.
Yeah.
But basically, they were saying that this... okay, here we go. I'll pull this up for you.
Yeah, I think more examples of like showing where you're finding this, this pattern.
Of course,
would be
of
cool
course.
for people on YouTube here.
Of course. Okay, so here is the axial tilt of the Earth, 23.5 degrees.
Yeah.
And history teaches us that this was a relatively new thing that was discovered. So they said these findings were first reported by Plotny not even 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're saying that this was first discovered about 2,100, 2,200 years ago.
Yeah.
And what I'm showing in these artifacts is that they knew about this tilt going back to the last ice age.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they were highly advanced.
How many years would that be? Like if they're saying Plotny there is what did you say, about 2,000 years ago?
Yes.
So what would the knowledge actually? How old would the knowledge actually be?
I would say it would be between 10 to 12,000 years old.
Yeah. And you're saying, just to be clear to the audience listening, you're saying they knew this based on the fact that they encoded this 23.5 degree thing, this template, into so many pieces of artwork and motifs. And, I think it'd be cool to, let's continue going through it, but it'd be cool to show a few more examples so people can kind of wrap their mind around, just how much they encoded this. Because we went through the one motif so far.
Yes.
And it's like, cool, one thing, but it starts to get crazy. So
okay.
I don't know if you want to keep going down this
okay,
path you're on here, or show more motifs.
I will show some more motifs. I'm just going to pull up another slide, so I'm going to have to stop this share screen. Now, okay, so this is a crazy example. Just to show that I'm not going crazy. And by the way, I think I have about 200 examples right now from all over the world, spanning from Göbekli Tepe till Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in your book, just so that for people who are wondering, which, there'll be a link, you guys can grab the book, but you go through about 50 in the book or so?
Yeah, I go through about 50 in the book. And the examples that I'm sharing with you, none of that's in the book.
Yeah.
So these are all new examples.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So check this out. This is a Babylonian cylinder seal. So this is like right at the end of Babylon. Well, not right at the end, but basically we have these cylinder seals, which people are always trying to interpret this, and nobody seems to understand what is going on here. So basically this is a Babylonian cylinder seal from 800 BC, and it says a worshiper or a priest before a divine symbol of Marduk, which is the spade symbol, and a Nabu, which is a stylus, which are these two objects here, and a god on a lion monster.
Yeah.
All right. Let's zoom in on this. All right. So first of all, this is what we call an asterism. Okay, so this is a combination of stars. You have the lion, which is Leo, and you have Scorpio. See the scorpion's tail? Mm-hmm. So this is a marker of time. And that's what people have to understand. These gods are actually markers of times of the stars and the sun.
Yeah.
And this is where we start to get controversial, because people haven't put this together yet in a way that this is like a time stamp to show. Okay. So you see how there's like these stars, these like sun images, like there's a line with a star, line with a star. If you actually measure it, it's actually showing you this code, this key that we spoke about, this 23.5 degrees. So right on the Babylonian cylinder seal, it's showing you summer solstice, equinox, and winter solstice.
Yeah.
Now, when I say a solar motif, remember I said when it's a solar motif, the image is set up at this angle. So it's the whole blueprint of this. So if you just take this key, this angle, the entire image, and I just showed a little because it gets a little confusing, but all the aspects of this image are created using the 23.5 degree line, even the tongue of the lion.
Yeah.
Okay. The
and
spade.
Just to kind of, before you keep going here, like, people are, if they're looking at this, and again, I'm going to remind you, if you're listening to this on the podcast, like, go to YouTube, make a point to go to YouTube and look at these actual things. I mean, you can keep listening, but when you look at them, don't think about it in the sense of, this is some artist that was alive at the time that decided to just like create art. And like, you don't see very many artists today putting all these hidden motifs. But when you're talking about this type of art in ancient times, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but most of the stuff that was created would have been created by like high classes of people, priest classes of people, people that would have been maybe exposed. And I think this is your hypothesis. They would have been exposed to levels of information that the general public wouldn't have.
That's correct. I think this was part, we talk currently about secret societies or secret orders.
Yeah.
And when you hear these philosophies from ancient Egypt, for example, the priest class were the ones who were the artists. They were the ones that designed the statues. And you had to be initiated into it. It wasn't just a person off the street deciding to make art.
Yeah.
The art was sacred. And I really believe this also connects to mimicry magic, which is a very ancient shamanic thing. So it would come out from the Neolithic and pre-Neolithic times, Paleolithic times. These basically, shamans would, let's say, dress up as the animals to basically become the animal, right? So it's a mimicry magic. And I believe that this has evolved as in, if you use the blueprint of the sun, so if you take the attribute of the sun, the actual movement of the sun, and place it and use that as the measure, so the actual measuring tool is an aspect of the sun, then they place the power of the gods, the power of the sun into the artifact, which makes it a holy artifact.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why only the priests that were initiated into this were able to create such artworks, because they held the power in them. And this is the power that I'm talking about. It's this secret code that connects the artifact to the cycles of life, to the gods, which were the stars, which were the sun.
Yep. Sounds good. Let's pick up with that spade you were just about to talk about there on that image.
So this is the spade, which is a symbol of Marduk, which is also 23.5 degrees. Just putting that out there. Now, I'm not really going to get into a lot of this because, but I'll just show you and your audience, because it's everywhere, absolutely everywhere. So this is Inanna, or Ishtar, the Queen of Heaven. It's a very famous image. A lot of people have seen this. This is almost 4,000 years old. Okay, so very ancient, 4,000 years old. The entire image itself is based off of this 23.5 degree angle. So it's a solar motif angle. And this blue line here that I put, see, one wing is at 23.5 degrees. The other wing is at 15 degrees.
Yeah.
And I will just explain that to you very quickly.
Before we get into that,
Yes.
Is there significance to the fact that she, similar to the Horus and Set example, I mean, she seems to be standing on the back of what is a similar type, like a Sphinx type character with two heads in either direction. Is there any significance to that?
I'm happy you brought that up because the interesting thing that I found is that the motif remains the same.
Yeah.
The characters in the story change.
Right.
Okay. So it's like hiding the information for different groups of people,
right,
using their systems of knowledge or their systems of beliefs, but keeping the code
the same.
unbreakable. All right. So I'm happy. So I got to show you one more thing here.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can grab it. The reason I'm doing this is because, where is this? Here we go. Here we go.
As you pull this up, I'll just remind listeners, we're talking about here a code, a sort of a sacred code that's been found in thousands and thousands of years of different cultures, different civilizations, all relating to the sun, and an incredible amount of precision, which I'm sure we're going to get to talking about in a little bit, but an incredible amount of precision to the point of understanding the tilt of the earth at 23.5 degrees, even 24 at times. which again, there's significance to that. And how did they have this incredible amount of precision in the past are kind of the questions we're going to get to, but we're kind of just establishing that these ancient cultures have encoded certain bits of artwork, certain motifs that would have been created by priest classes or high classes of people who would have been initiated into creating this stuff. So with all that said, you now have the presentation. Go, continue on.
Sure. We are a microcosm of the macrocosm. So we are a reflection of the universe. Mm-hmm. So we are the first tool of measure. And, they teach you this in Boy Scouts, teach you this in the Army. If you don't have a watch, all you do is you take your arm like this in front of your eye, in front of your face, you align it to the horizon, and you place the sun over your fingers, like in the picture, and that equals 1 hour of time in the sky. So you can actually count the hours of the day using your hand. And the reason is that the sun moves through the sky 15 degrees per hour. So to have your hand out like this equals 1 hour, which equals 15 degrees of sky. So you can actually measure the sky at 15 degrees equals one hand is 15 degrees. Mm-hmm. And the Egyptians knew all about this. Sumerians knew all about this. And they could actually use their hands as the tool of measuring. So you can measure the 45 degree angle, you could measure the 15, 23.5, 15 degree angle just by looking at your different fingers and the position out in front of your face. So you'll actually see like statues of Isis and Nephesis kneeling, and they're holding their hand like this in front of their face. And they're just looking at their hand, And then people are like, okay, this is the mourning Isis or the mourning Nephesis. They're mourning the death of their of Osiris. They're mourning. They're crying basically. Yeah. But really, it's showing you how to look at your hand to calculate time and space.
Yeah.
So that's the first rule. Is this comes from a very ancient understanding that you are the measuring tool of the cosmos.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah.
So now we'll go back to, because I had to explain the 15 degrees.
Yeah.
So that you could understand why I'm putting the 15 degrees in these images, because they use both 15 degrees and 23.5 degrees. So you can see Ishtar here, her whole body is set up at the 23.5 degrees.
Yeah.
And this one wing, so this wing is at 23, this wing is at 15 degrees.
Yeah.
And you can see how precise this is, like from her belly button to the eye of, it's so unbelievably precise.
Yeah.
If you go to these strange artifacts that she's holding in her hands, it's like a rope. They call it a rope or a stick. And you have this circle around it in her hands. Now, if you measure it, you see how it's like not straight?
Yeah.
It curves up. This one is almost straight, but this one really kind of breaks and curves. So if you measure it, this hand is tuned to 23.5, and this hand is tuned to 15 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we even go to earlier examples, so here's an earlier example of Ishtar. Again, standing in this motif, standing on the back of two ibexes. Her whole body, again, is in this.
Yeah.
So it's a repeated pattern with these artifacts, with these gods, going back thousands of years. So this knowledge had to have been passed down somehow to all these things. We could even go back even earlier. So this is a seal of Inanna, Queen of Heaven. This is about 4,500 years old.
Yeah.
And you can see she has these strange things attached to her back. Her arm is stretched down holding a rod. She's standing on a lion. What do we know about lions? Leo, the constellation.
Yep.
You have the sun here. This is the star, which is the sun. You have this strange line here, and you also have this strange line here.
Yeah.
All right? you have the red lines are the 23.5 degree lines.
Yep.
And you can see that it goes through her arm at 23.5 degrees. It comes to all these symbols and goes into the sun. And again, her arm, see that arm? It's going down at 15 degrees.
Yeah.
So this is like 4,500 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go into the future, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same motif. Now, let's just jump to Egypt for a second here. So
I just want to say here real quick,
Yes.
because there's something I think we forgot to mention early on, which is that
Sure.
in a lot of these things, it's all going through the hands, it's all going through the eyes, it's all going through sometimes the belly button, right? So, the idea here is that when you started to notice, part of the code is that the angles are specific to things like the eyes, like the hands, like the belly button. So it's like people who might be wondering which skepticism is great, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, who might be wondering, well, I could place this anywhere. Well, part of the code was look to the hands, look to the eyes, look to the belly button. And you'll find that once you do that, this code now shows up in all of these different cultures around the world.
Yes. And if you go to Egypt, for example, they always describe like the gods like Horus, like his eyes are the sun. His eyes are the moon. You go to Hathor, her eyes are the sun, her eyes are the moon.
Yeah.
It talks about that the eyes themselves are the sun and the moon. Now, like I said, with the hand in front, and you hear this line always, with the outstretched arm, with your hand outstretched in front of your face, your eye literally connects to the palm of your hand. So your eye in the palm of your hand becomes the measuring tool of the heavens.
Like a Hamza.
Okay? The Hamsa, the eye in the hand, which is one of the most ancient symbols. And I won't here. I'll jump ahead because you said the Hamsa. All right, I'll just jump. Oh, there's Thoth basically showing you. But let's go here. Okay, this is one of the oldest Hamsas ever found.
So
Okay.
I don't see your screen yet. I don't know if it's just on my end or if it's having issues connecting with our servers, trying to reconnect.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll come through.
I see it on my end on the screen.
Yep, just keep going.
All right. So this is one of the oldest Hamsas ever discovered from Catalhoyuk, Turkey. And this, I think, goes back to about 8,000, 9,000 years old. And this is a little complicated, but basically what I've discovered is that there's a solar ratio depending on the latitude of the sun during the solstices and equinoxes, creates a ratio of 3 circles. Now, if you take those 3 circles of the sun and you overlay it over the Hamsa, it's literally a perfect match. If this was any other latitude, it wouldn't work. So it's almost like they encoded the ratios of where the positions of the sun were to the hand going back 8,000 years. I mean, that's insane to even contemplate. Yeah. But we find these tools in Moundville. These are copper gorgets from Moundville, Alabama, showing the eye in the hand, showing you the symbol of the stepped, or the stepped pyramid, which is the stepping of the sun from winter solstice, equinox, summer solstice. It's actually, and then it's showing you the solar ratio. So if we were to really decode this, it has all the ratios in it. It has all the angles in this to make up this image. Yeah.
And what's interesting here, I don't know if you're about to point out the changes in the ratios.
Yes. Yeah. So this 33-degree ratio, these circles of the sun change. Whereas this is actually kind of close because it's only at 37.6. Yeah. But I can show you ratios that are much different than this. Yeah,
and the significance of this is these cultures produced somehow a different ratio based on their location. And
Yes.
so they were able to not only correctly decipher the tilt of the Earth, but they were able to correctly decipher based on their latitude what their solar ratio would have been, and it's found in the artwork. So this is where your heart or your head starts to kind of just fall off.
Yes, it starts to get really complex, but it's like there's a secret science or a secret language
Yeah.
that had to be known before the artwork was even created. So it's called, or I would call it, it's intentional artwork or intentional design.
Yeah.
Using these suns. So here's Peru at the gate of the gods. So it's at 16.1 degrees south latitude, and you can see how different that solar ratio is.
Yeah.
But if you look at the gate of the god, do you see this on your screen? I hope you see it on your screen.
I do, yeah.
Okay. Here's the gate of the gods, and you can see these strange lines. They say these are natural lines in this mountain side.
Yeah.
And then you have this door.
Yeah.
Well, if you just measure those lines, they're 23.5 degrees.
Right. So you're saying all these historians, all these people have looked at no, these lines don't mean anything. You take this 23.5 degree code that you're finding around the world, and I mean, if you're looking at the image, you're seeing that it perfectly overlays these lines. Like there's no question of where, like it's not like you could have just made up something else. Like they are perfectly overlaid on these lines.
I'm following their lines.
Right.
I'm not just placing them on here. I'm following what's there.
Yeah.
And so what you can see is they intersect the doorways to make up the doorway in the specific angles.
Mm-hmm.
And now we get to this weird thing, which is even more complex, which is I call it the eye of the sun, which is the 3 solar ratios. So this is for Peru, 16.1 degrees. And you can see this line here for summer solstice.
Yeah.
So this line right here is tilted from 23.5 degrees. It's tilted 16.1 degrees.
From the zenith, which is straight up.
That's correct. Because that's the location of the latitude of where this site is.
Yeah.
Now, if we take this line, this weird line, and we place it on the door, it actually follows that T pattern identically.
Mm-hmm.
So summer solstice line is the line of that doorway.
And visibly to them, how would this doorway, like as the sun changes, how would this doorway illuminate differently?
That's exactly what these false doors are all about. They're sundials, they're calendars. And if I put the solar ratio over this whole site, you can see that the winter solstice line cuts the door.
Yeah. And
then at the bottom here where it sits, you have the summer and the equinox.
Right.
But if you take this ratio and put it, I just want to say this quickly here. Look carefully, and I know a lot of people are just listening to this, but if you see this on YouTube, I want you to look very carefully at this image of this door. You see there's a hole right in the center there.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the sides, look, you see these lines, these chisel marks.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then this is the shadow. See the shadow?
Yeah.
So where the sun is in the sky will cast a shadow on these various lines and points.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trained to know how to measure the sun by shadow, you can look at the door and you can see what time of year it is.
Right.
And the whole mysticism of this door is that, during a specific time of the year, the sun will pass through the door. Well, what does that mean? It means during the equinox, there is no shadow.
Yeah.
So if we take the ratios and we put them inside this door, it's identical.
Yeah.
So, I don't even remember where I was going with this because I got a little pulled in a different direction, but just wanted to check things. So what I'm really saying here is that there are so many artifacts, so many different descriptions of the gods, so many architectural wonders that we find around the world. And they are complete mysteries to the world. We still don't understand anything about it. We have all these theories, especially ancient alien theories, but they're just theories. They're not fact yet. And then I come along and I say, what if they're representative of the knowledge of basically the cosmology of the sun and the cycles of time? And they say, okay, we'll prove it. I say, okay, how is it built? Measure it. What angle is it created in? And it all matches. And it's not random. I'm not putting random lines to make it work. Like you said, I'm literally sticking to the lines that are in the artwork itself. And the next question ultimately would be, what does this even mean? If we find this on every ancient civilization around the planet, if we find this code in every place around the planet, it would mean that this knowledge was known by all the ancient people.
Yeah.
But it's not something you can just figure out and make up. It's too specific. It's like a language.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of like the story of Babel, where it's like everyone around the planet had one language. And that language was connected to the tower, which is a ziggurat, which is the observatory of the heavens, you know? And they said that once they had this language, they became like the gods.
Yeah.
And because of that, they spread them across the world and they got rid of this language.
Yeah.
My theory is this language exists and it's held by a very select group of people. And I've traced this all the way to Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
That he used all of this knowledge that I'm talking about, and he used it to create some of his most incredible pieces of artwork.
Are we allowed to go through that one? Just before we do, I want to kind of recap
Yes.
one more thing here, because, you know, I find that at times, like certain words just, you know, it starts to get people going in different directions. So I want to kind of reiterate saying, like, in Jason's interpretation, like things like gods would be, imagine back then being able to understand the cycles of the sun and what power that would give you over being able to grow food and you know, do things like have solid fertility, not only with the earth, but just safe times to do certain things with animal husbandry and making families, like all these things. Godlike power in that sense could be something as simple as knowing how to survive in an incredibly difficult time. And so having this language would be incredibly powerful, because it's basically going to prolong people for years and years to come, as we've seen. And I know we're going to get into Da Vinci, but you know, the questions here is ultimately, how would all these civilizations have had this knowledge? How would they have known the earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees, you know, prior to making this artwork, right? How would they have known that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That is the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll always need mysteries because it keeps us digging.
Yeah.
I'm working on a new book, which I shared with you a little, which I get even more in depth. I found a completely other blueprint that rips this thing wide open.
Yeah.
So hopefully we could discuss that in a year from now.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure
but-
we'll be discussing it at your house later this week, but hey.
Yes, yes. But the most incredible thing is that it keeps, the mystery is so intense. See, I can't give too much away, but basically, how does a people who don't even have pottery yet understand complex mathematical things and cycles of time?
Yeah.
You know, how did that come to be? And then how did it come to be that civilizations from around the world that should not have any connection with one another have this in common with other civilizations around the world, it means that one, it had to have been passed down by somebody. So there was a connection or prehistory that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Or there's another possibility, which there is an advanced race. I'm not saying ancient aliens, but I'm saying different cultures talk about them, that there are teachers that have come to different civilizations to seed knowledge.
Yeah.
So basically teaching them these things. And any of these possibilities are incredible, and it opens up a very interesting perspective of our past that is not being discussed. It's not being acknowledged. And even if I could prove it with hundreds of examples using angles and math and all this, like, even if I can solidly prove it, people have not grasped to the fact that this is even possible in that time period.
Yeah.
And because they believe it's not possible in that time period, my work is going unlooked at.
Essentially what's happening in this particular case is the evidence, which is actually very profound and simple, is not being considered because the conclusion that it sort of draws is not believable. So because, we talk about this in our bias masterclass, which is when in times where the conclusion seems absolutely impossible, we discount the evidence. And this is why I think it's really, really important if you I encourage you to pick up a copy of Jason's book here, which will be linked below, but go into it from the standpoint of, I'm not trying to say what it means, right? And we practice this a lot in embodiment, right? When you're listening to a sensation in your body, you don't have to create a story of what that sensation means, right? When you're looking at the evidence that Jason's presenting in his book, first just take it all in. Just see whether or not the motifs, the angles, the different points that he's making in the 50 he covers. Really just take it all in, and then maybe go back and play around with, okay, what does this all mean, right? So that way that the evidence doesn't become something that we discount because it's like, well, this just challenges me too much and I don't want to do this. And, and that's often what happens in society.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's shift gears here. We've established that there's this code, there's this motif, or sorry, I should just say there's a code hidden in art all around the world, specific to solar motifs. And we have one famous example that you're going to go through here, including the interpretation. And again, this would have been somebody who was a secret society class member of society, which is Leo, not DiCaprio, but Da Vinci.
I'll just share one image first so we just get a better understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is from the Book of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see you have Anubis, you have the serpent, which is Apophis, you have this is a version of Thoth. And I just want to show some points here. You got this red point on the monkey's ass. Okay. Mm-hmm. You got the eye, the red eye right there. Mm-hmm. You have the red eye of Anubis.
Yeah.
Okay. You got the staff. So let's just connect these lines. Okay. Yeah. From the monkey's ass going up the snake to the snake's eye is 15 degrees.
Yeah.
How can that be random after what I've been talking about?
Yeah.
From the tail of the snake to the eye of the snake is 23.5 degrees. Mm-hmm. Okay. From the eye of Anubis to the eye of the snake is 23.5 degrees.
Yeah.
From the angle of his staff to the eye of the snake is 23.5 degrees.
Yeah. You
can't just create this randomly.
Yeah.
This is a design, and it has to do with the serpent is the sun, or the path of the sun, the spirit of the sun, and it's showing it moving through time.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just That's just one.
Just for those that are maybe pretty adept at knowledge around the change in the Earth's tilt from sometimes 24, 23 and a half, and I think it goes down to, does it go to 22?
22.1.
0.1, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you just show a little bit of that?
Yes. Well, I'll just explain it. It's easier just to explain it. Is that the tilt of the the tilt of the Earth oscillates on a cycle that's about 44 or 41,000 years, and it oscillates between 22.1 degrees tilt to 24 degrees tilt. So in our current epoch of history, it's roughly around 23.5 degrees.
Yeah.
If you go all the way back to, let's say, like Göbekli Tepe, the end of the last ice age, it's closer to 24 degrees.
Yeah.
And so when I go back to the artifacts that go into more ancient times, I change from 23.5 degrees to 24 degrees, and then it works.
Yeah. And then,
so it's like they were so
precise.
Unbelievably precise that they knew to change 1 degree or like half a degree.
Yeah. The implications of that for me is that it makes this code that much more legitimate, because you're now seeing that in their epoch, their cycle of time, a minor change, a half a degree change would actually match. So if the code was correct, a half a degree change would now match all their artifacts, right? And then going to a different time where now that reading is 23 and a half a change the other way would now match all their artifacts. And it does, which means that the code, like, I don't know, I laugh because it's so simple. But it's like, like you've pointed out, it's something that nobody's really talked about. Maybe, I mean, I'm assuming that you're sure nobody's talked about this because you've been in this for a while and you haven't really found this anywhere else. But it's like, it just feels like it offers such a different explanation of things that people are still mystified by. And it's kind of shocking how it's not broader knowledge, at this point.
Well, that's why we're talking about it, because I got to get this out here. And it's funny. It's like, I'm not the creator of this or even the discoverer of this. Mm-hmm. This is here in our world. And all I'm doing is look at that. It's right there.
Yeah.
That's all I'm doing. Just pointing it out. All right. I'm letting them speak to us.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way to do it. Okay, so here's Leonardo da Vinci, and one of his most amazing works is The Last Supper.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want you to just take this picture in, and you see the 12 disciples sitting around the table. You have Jesus in the center. Behind him are 3 windows.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just speaking specifically geometry right now. Okay, because this whole thing is set up very specifically in its geometry and its angles.
Yeah, it's a very interesting perspective.
Yes. So if we just trace the body of Jesus, you get the 52-degree pyramid.
Yeah.
And we know the 52-degree pyramid because that's the Pyramid of Giza. It's like there's so many pyramids around the world that are created at 52-degree slope or angle. Now, if you look closely, he has one eye closed and his head is turned. So the center of the pyramid, he has one eye in it. And this is the image of the Eye of Providence, the Eye of Horus, the pyramid with the eye on it on the back of the dollar bill.
Yeah.
Okay, this is very ancient symbolism here. Then you can see how this apostle, which we'll call Mary, she's off at a very specific angle here.
Yeah.
If we trace this angle to the top of the ceiling here, to the bottom of this table, you get this perfect 45 degrees cube. Now, this is where we start to get into the angles. The perspective of the entire painting is set to 26 degrees. and it goes directly into his eye. Now, 26 degrees is half of 52, so it's using the pyramid angle of creation at 52 degrees to create the entire perspective going into the eye. Remember before I was saying the secret is always the eye?
Yeah.
So the whole perspective is 26 degrees into the eye. Now, it has been explained many times by many other authors that this image is actually Jesus as represents the sun.
Yeah.
And you have the 12 apostles, which represent the zodiac signs, starting with Aries and ending with Pisces.
Yeah.
And then Mary is Virgo. She's the only woman in the cast.
Yeah.
Now, if you take the point of the line from the end of the table up through Capricorn, so this guy here is Capricorn.
Yeah.
From here to here above his back is 23.5 degrees. And that's exactly what the Tropic of Capricorn, or Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn is set at 23.5 degrees.
And I just want to point out, for people that are listening and who are going to, and again, I say go and watch this on YouTube, is when you look at this painting, there are almost weird spaces and lines and angles in the way that the clothing was kind of, specifically so tight to the physical body of the person, where it's almost like that gap, that angle, that line is just so perfect. It's just so, like, why is it done that? Why is there this perfect angle between Jesus and Mary? Like, and the 23 and a half that you were talking about coming from that corner of the table, if you look at that guy's back, like, it was so precisely drawn that way when you now that you look at it, right? So I just want to remind people the importance of going and checking this out on YouTube, because it's pretty profound when you have a look at it.
Yes. And if you go from the center point up, the other side is the Tropic of Capricorn. And again, it's at 23.5 degrees. Mm-hmm. From the point of the opposite end of the table, going to Jesus's eye, is 15 degrees. We have Jesus looking to the side. He has 3 windows behind him. These 3 windows are very ancient symbols. They're called the gates of the gods. Goes all the way back to Samaria. And basically what this is each gate is the gate in which the sun passes through at different times of the year. Mm-hmm. And all different architectures around the planet are set up so that the gates hold the sun right in the center of it during the equinoxes or during the solstices. It's found all around the world.
Yeah.
So we can see Jesus's face is turned to one side. This is the Trinity, where you see Jesus has 3 faces. Looking straight, it's the equinox. Looking to the side, it's the solstices. He is the solar deity. Around him are the 4 angels. You have the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the man. Mm-hmm. And if you know astrology, these are the 4 children of Horus. This is the 4 cardinal signs of the 4 cardinal signs of the zodiac. And we have this exact same thing in Ezekiel's vision of the Merkabah, the chariots, that the 4 heavenly beings, the wheels within wheels. The 4 heavenly beings have the face of the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the man.
Yeah.
All right. What they're describing is the zodiac.
Yeah.
They're talking about the sun, which is the solar deity, moving through the cardinal directions, the pillars of creation, the 4 sons of Horus. And in this period of time, it was the bull. You can see he's stepping on the bull, So you got the bull, you got the scorpion. They're complete opposites. And you got the lion and Aquarius, the lion and the man.
Yeah.
And Scorpio, there's 3 stages of Scorpio. And one of the other versions of Scorpio is the eagle. So what we're seeing here is the zodiac. So everybody's saying, okay, this is Jesus is the sun, and these are the apostles of the zodiac. but they're not actually showing that that story is being told strictly from geometry.
Yeah.
That's what blows people's minds, is that just using the geometry code, it explains that this, what you're looking at is the sun passing through the zodiac. So what you're actually looking at is this. So you have, these are the constellations, the 12 constellations of the zodiac.
Yeah.
And you have the sun, the solar deity, moving through those cardinal signs. So that is, I think that's all I will share today. That's a lot to take in.
That's a lot to take in. Yeah. And then that's that's an intense note, because again, going back to it for those that are, the Last Supper interpretation, I have heard before from an astrological point of view, and just to go back to it, it's like what Jason did there is he selected very specific points that anybody would select. Like, okay, if I go from the edge of this table, right, which is where that part of the painting ends, and I come up through the key points, right, which are the eyes, right, and Jesus being in the center, Jesus being the sun. If you knew their language, which was everything is about the sun, and everything is about these key points that they would focus on. You said earlier, the eyes, the sun and the moon. This is a classic thing, right? We talk about the hands, we talk about the belly button, right? Again, fertility. All these different pieces come into the mix. All these things, they're not only there, but they become so incredibly obvious. And that's the part that is astounding about this, is it's like, if you were to say that there was a hidden language in various things, I would say that you pretty much figured out at least a good chunk of what that language is trying to say. And this would have been profound to these people because it was sacred to them to know how the sun worked and how to operate in that particular way.
Yes. And like I said, the mystery is still there.
Yeah.
And I found a new piece to that puzzle. Mm-hmm. So we have to stay tuned, because the next thing that's going to come out is going to blow this stuff out of the water. Right.
Well, whew. This is me taking this in for probably like the fourth or fifth time. And each time it gets clearer from the standpoint of like, you start to put together, like, you understand the language better. It's like learning any other language, right? I don't know. There's a part of me that's like, the skeptical part, right? That's like, well, you could just have put that there, or you could, like numerology or like some of these other things, when they can sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes these things can get flaky and finicky, and like, people are making things fit where they want to fit. And I really don't see that here. I really don't. I see something that is so obvious and so profound, and I think this is why it's very meaningful. Get this first copy of the first run at this, which is that book that you've published already, yes. And really just look at it and take it in little by little. Then listen to this podcast again, and then take it in again. You'll be like, okay, there is something here, and these Jason's not just pulling it out of his ass. So,
well, thank you for that.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I know it's a difficult subject matter, and I know you need to know a lot of things about mysticism and motifs in ancient civilization to understand the direction of this.
Yeah.
And I know when I first presented it to you, I can see your kind of eyes go wide. Like most people.
Yeah, and also like, wait a minute, what does that mean again?
Yeah. So I think it's been about a year until I've seen kind of it click with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, look, it's taken me, I don't even know how many years I've been studying this. It took me all these years of studying this for like it to just click and to find that little key, that little glimpse of something I've never seen before.
Yeah.
And that's something that you've never seen before is so exciting, because there's something else that we don't understand. Mm-hmm. There's a mystery to be solved, and puzzles to be solved, and I love that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. A lot of fun. And again, this I think just like it feeds the curiosity of human beings. It, gets us back into that mode of stop pretending we know everything, right? And just have fun with it. And it's a joy to kind of explore it that way. And I do hope that this continues to expand. And I mean, for the heck of it, didn't you receive somewhat of an acknowledgement or award
I
to some
did,
extent?
and hopefully people can see it behind me.
Yeah. So what
There's
exactly?
there's a pyramid, a big Shungite pyramid. I was acknowledged at Stairway to the Stars, which is part of Disclosure Fest and Fade to Black Radio with Jimmy Church. I won or I was recognized and won the 2023 Galactic Visionary Author Award. Mm-hmm. So that was for my work with Astral Genesis. And that felt so good to be acknowledged for this work. So it is getting out there. People are seeing what's being presented, and that feels good.
Yeah. Oh, that's congratulations. I mean, like I said, this is, if you're listening on the podcast, go look at the YouTube, because there's something here, and people who've been looking at this stuff, I know I've been, a lot of my audience may or may not know how deep I am into some of this stuff. Because I know we write about anything from current events to personal transformation and sometimes UFOs and ancient cultures, but it's a mix of stuff. And so sometimes people don't quite know, but I've been looking at this field for a lot of years, and I do think this is a profound contribution. So it's and so does, this is the interesting part about that award, is so do other people who have been in this field and who interview people like this every single day for their job. They looked at this and said, shit, there's something here. So totally worth your time. Check it out. And thanks for coming on the show. Look forward to not only discussing a little bit more behind the scenes, but your next big project should be fantastic.
Thank you. So it's always a pleasure to share this information.
All righty. Where can people, I'll put some links, but just to reiterate, where can people find more about this, your work, the books, everything?
My personal website is thecrystalsun.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at Jason_Quitt. Or you can go on Amazon and you can pick up the new book that we were discussing today called Astral Genesis. And I also have the original book that this came from, which is The Egyptian Postures of Power, which gets into mysticism and Qigong. So it's all out there. Just look up my name, Jason Quitt.
Bango, bango. That's it. That's all. Thanks again for coming on, and look forward to more in the future.
Thank you.